Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. We continue on with the class of 1999 with one of the big, most critically acclaimed movies of the year. It was nominated for several Oscars, did not win any, unfortunately, even though probably should have. And it is Michael Mann's The Insider. And joining me to discuss it today is an actor who I've had on the podcast before. We discussed American Beauty earlier this year, which was a big Oscar winner. And please join me in welcoming Timothy Cox back to the podcast. Thank you very much for joining me again.
Thank you, Brian. Happy to be back.
So I remember first seeing The Insider shortly before the Oscars in 2000. I saw it with my grandfather, who was big into movies, and we saw a lot of movies together. And he'd come down during my spring break in college, and so I was off school, so it's like we went to some movies together while my parents worked, and The Insider was one of those. And I remember being really taken by the movie. I thought it was a really terrific film. I At the time, I will have said that it won all of the Oscars. In the end, I will have said the Oscars were right at the time about the choices it made. Now I'm not so sure, especially going through some of the films of '99. I definitely feel differently about a lot of them. And The Insider is definitely one of them. And the thing that I think is most interesting about the film is when you look at it through the prism of Michael Mann's career. Because on the one hand, it's very outside of the realm of what we associate with Michael Mann, but on the other hand, it's also stylistically speaking something that's very reminiscent of Heat and even Collateral and
Oh,
Miami
definitely.
Vice stylistically speaking.
Absolutely. I mean, all of Michael Mann's films have a certain stamp. I mean, the visual style, the he always acquires like the best screenwriters and the cast that he always assembles. I mean, Heat alone, it's just like a who's who of just great character actors. The same thing here in The Insider.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
we could do a whole episode alone on Bruce McGill's memorable scene
Yeah.
where he just chews out Wings Hauser. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember like when I saw that scene, I was like, oh my God, like I remember cheering him on because, you know, Bruce McGill is an actor who's been around for a while. And I mean, most of the audience probably knows him as D-Day from Animal House. But
Yeah.
this, you know, like, yeah.
I
But
forgot.
well, like he's had like this very long and distinguished career, but this was the movie, and I think he's in like only one or two scenes, but man, but that's Michael Mann's films, like John Voight popping up briefly in Heat, or William Fincher, and I mean it's just a who's who. That's always when you watch a Michael Mann film, you know you're going to get that quality of performance,
Yeah.
visual style, writing, detailed. He is very, very detailed as far as like the story he tells and how he tells it and trying to keep it as accurate as possible. I mean, I know Mr. Wallace was not thrilled, I don't think, with his depiction in the
No.
movie. Christopher Plummer's performance he had praise for, but not for the depiction in the screenplay.
Yeah.
But of course, we'll get into that more.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. No, and the first thing I wrote down when I was taking notes on the movie was just looking at the opening credits and just seeing the cast. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of people, like, you remember Al Pacino, you remember Russell Crowe, you remember Christopher Plummer. Those are the three main pillars of the narrative. But then you also have Diane Vernora,
Stephen Tobolowsky, Philip
Phil,
Baker Hall. I
Lindsay
mean, Rip Torn.
Krause.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Rip Torn. Oh my God, just so
I
many
mean, it's
people.
just well, and like even you got Wings Hauser in there.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many. Gina Gershon. I mean, like it's really
Michael
and everybody.
is in this. Like
Michael,
before I
before
ever
Harry
knew
Potter, yeah.
him as Dumbledore, like he's in here as Russell
Thomas
Crowe's former
Sandifer. Yeah.
boss, and it's just one scene, and oh my god, he is so chilling in the scene because it's like you know exactly what he's saying, and but you also get the impression that like Jeffrey Wigand is not the way Russell Crowe plays Wigand. He's very introvert. He's very intellectual, but he it also feels like he doesn't necessarily get understand social cues to a certain extent. So you also kind of wonder how much you do kind of get the feeling he gets what Gammon's character is saying to him in that one scene, where he's basically changing the arrangement of his non NDA,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's such a chilling performance, and it's like it blows my mind the fact that like 4 years before he played Dumbledore, it's like yeah, Michael Gambon is pretty intense in this movie.
Well,
But
it's just a testament. I mean, Michael Gambon, for people who don't know, he's one of the most distinguished actors in the English-speaking language. He,
yeah,
worked Royal Shakespeare, and I mean, like Ian McKellen, like he was an actor who, was discovered in movies later in his life. He played LBJ and memorably in Path to War, and just yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like these actors, they come on, actors like him and Rip Torn and Philip Baker Hall, Stephen Tobolowsky, Gina Gershon, Diane Venora, Lindsay Krause, they all come on and score their points. And I
yeah,
think that's a testament because they all want to work with Michael Mann because they know
mm-hmm.
that his movies are of a certain quality that not many other filmmakers can kind of copy and capture.
Yeah. And so we've sort of danced around the story this story up until this point. The story, if you're not familiar with the Insider and you're listening to this, is the story of uh, a very famous segment that Mike Wallace and producer Lowell Bergman did on Jeffrey Wigand for 60 Minutes back in the 90s. And what Jeffrey Wigand had worked in the tobacco industry at one of the big tobacco companies.
Brown and Williamson.
And he's basically blowing the whistle on big tobacco and saying no, they're well aware of what they're doing. They're chemically modifying cigarettes for the purpose of
An
getting people
addiction to
addicted
nicotine.
to them. And he's basically blowing the whistle on this. And the big drama in the film is the producers of 60 Minutes and Mike Wallace trying to get around a non-disclosure agreement that Wigand has been forced to sign that may result in legal action against both Wigand and 60 Minutes and CBS.
Mm-hmm.
And CBS ended up pulling the story for time, the segment for the time, because of the fact that
A lawsuit.
a lawsuit was threatened, and basically Wigand's life was ruined by this because Bergman was behind him. Wallace, as we sort of hinted at, was not terribly pleased with his characterization in this movie because
That he was kind of on the fence. Yeah.
it looks like he's more on the fence than he really was. But eventually they did air it for, and I can't remember why they ended up were being able to air it. I thought it was something to do with one of the lawsuits.
I don't know if I remember correctly. I think they aired an heavily edited version, which I think Bergman was completely against. And but I think just getting the story out there. I mean, even in whatever version. But the sad fact is, I don't know if it really changed anything.
No,
because cigarettes now are still a $1 billion a year business, and people are still smoking them.
Mm-hmm. But Al Pacino plays Lowell Bergman, and one of the things I love about Al Pacino in this movie is he's so very different from
Oh yeah.
the Al Pacino that we had seen in films like Heat, films like The Devil's Advocate, sort of the actor that Pacino had sort of become as far as sort of this great over actor in his later, at this point in junction in his career. It's a very different performance from him, but it's much more subdued. It's much
Yeah.
more. It still has those moments of high, going for the rafters acting, but there's something more subtle about him, and he's honestly playing like he's playing a character that is very unlike any character that I feel like we've seen him in before.
Well, I think this. I said briefly. I think this is the last really great feature film performance that Pacino has given. I mean, he's done some wonderful work on television. His work as Jack Kevorkian and You Don't
Mm-hmm.
Know Jack is outstanding. Of course, the Paterno,
Yeah,
but Angels in America. But at this, yeah, it's true. He's never played a character like this. Like he's passionate, but there's no hoo-haing in this one.
yeah,
And I mean, there's so many wonderful scenes that he has in the film. Like basically, when he, uh, basically tells off CBS and said, are you a newsman or are you a businessman?
mm-hmm.
Fighting for the ethics of journalism.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the great things I think about the character and about Pacino in the character is the fact that it is very outside of the realm of what we're used to with Pacino, and but also feels very much in character for Pacino to play this role
Oh, sure.
because he is a character. He's in a way he's sort of he is sort of like the cop you played in Heat, where it's like he's he's he has a
Obsessive.
very he's very obsessive. He's very by the book. He isn't afraid to go by the book, but he also isn't afraid to tear the book out if he feels like he needs to get done what he needs to get done.
Well, it's like, he says to Philip Baker Hall, you pay me to go out and get stories like this. And he does it. And when he delivers
Mm-hmm.
Don Hewitt and oh God, Eric, that I think who Stephen Tobolowsky plays, they kind of cave because they know that Brian Williamson, the biggest tobacco company in the world,
Mm-hmm.
is going to sue 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
And, in Lowell Bergman's eyes, he's like, bring it on. Because
Yeah.
the moment But no, it's a. I return to it. I probably hadn't watched it in about a decade, and it's an extraordinary film. I mean, it's.
Mm-hmm.
I would think, yeah. I think now, because yeah, it did not scoop up any Academy Award nominations or Academy Award wins, I should
Yeah.
say, because that was the year of American Beauty,
Yeah.
and I think now people look at American Beauty a little differently. I mean, it's still a marvelous film, but I think people
Mm-hmm.
may look at it a little differently. But the thing that about the Insider that's still extraordinary is that it is still very, very, very relevant. It has aged well.
Yeah.
It, I think, every performance in the film is spot on. The visual style, all of that is just it's a stunning movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think and I agree. I mean, we talked about American Beauty earlier in the year, and it is still a wonderful film. Still holds up very well. Held up much better than I expected to necessarily, given the recent past revelations when it comes to Kevin Spacey. But at the same time, I look at something like The Insider, and I I do feel like to a certain extent that Russell Crowe probably should have won this over Kevin Spacey. I mean, he ended up winning the next year for Gladiator, which most people, it's like most people looked at that win and like sort of as a retroactive victory, sort of honoring him for his work in The Insider.
Right. Yeah.
Because
And
I
the
mean,
Academy does that. Yeah.
Gladiator, it's a good film, and Russell Crowe is very good in it, but you know, I
It's
don't.
not The Insider.
No, it's not The Insider, and it's certainly not this performance.
No.
His no him as Wygand. I mean, this is a great character actor performance. This is it. You know, it's not really a movie star role. Like Pacino's got the movie star role.
Hmm.
He's got the very showy role. Russell Crowe's the character actor role, and it's one of those. And he's just so the way he brings Wygand's paranoia and internal the struggle that he's feeling. He doesn't have struggles with telling his story. He just understands that there's danger. He does understands that there are dangers in
At every
telling that
turn.
story.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't necessarily question himself in whether it's the right thing to do to tell this story.
He knows it's all about really like what he is willing to lose. I mean,
Yeah.
his life is put in danger. His family's life is put in danger. I think probably the thing that is the least concern is being sued.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think the fact that that his life is being threatened and that of his family,
Mm-hmm.
that is really what's weighing on him. And one of the things that he does so brilliantly is he underplays, which
Yes.
that's the mark of like just a great performance because it's not Russell Crowe at the time was a big strapping guy, and like this is someone who is the complete opposite of his persona, the tough guy persona. He's very
Yeah.
quiet, very thoughtful, very methodical. He's a scientist, so no, he delivered brilliantly on that. I mean, and the fact that he has to carry a heavy load of the film with Al Pacino. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty heavy. I mean, I think this was probably one of the first movies that Russell Crowe, he had done Quick and the Dead, he had done Virtuosity, he had done, but like to American audiences, this was really like one of his big introductions. I mean, L.A. Confidential
Yeah.
before that as well, but this was really like his a big showcase for him for
Yeah,
American audiences.
he was definitely still on the way up as far as his star moving on the rise. I mean, like you said, he did Futurosity, Virtuosity, Quick and the Dead, which are he's all right roles in smaller movies,
He
and
got his feet
then
wet in American movies after working in, I think, New Zealand and Australia. I
yeah,
mean, he was a star for many, many years there, and he gave a number of wonderful performances.
yeah,
Romper Stomper comes to mind. I think there was a movie he did where I think it's The Sum of Us, where he was absolutely brilliant in. But no, but for American audiences, Quick and the Dead, Virtuosity, L.A. Confidential, especially because,
yeah.
and then of course it led to this and to everything else that's happened since.
Yeah. Yeah, and LA Confidential was definitely sort of, even though with those earlier films, LA Confidential was really the one that I think American audiences really took notice of him in. And then, like you said, because this one, he had The Insider, he had Gladiator, and then he had Beautiful Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, it's been his career after that.
Master and Commander and
Yeah.
everything that, and then and of course I just finished watching The Loudest Voice where he played Roger Ailes.
Oh, wow.
I think that's the best performance he's given since The Insider.
Okay.
Like just I mean, of course, unlike Jeffrey Wygant, Roger Ailes was not a quiet, shy guy. I mean,
No.
Roger Ailes was big, bombastic. I mean, but like just so he has this ability to like really put you on edge, like and to fully whether the character is likable or not, to really just he takes you along for a ride. And
Yeah.
it's I mean there are the portions of The Loudest Voice like that are a little difficult to watch, but no, he's outstanding in the part,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
his performance in Jeffrey Wygant as Jeffrey Wygant. But
Mm-hmm. No, and the fact of the matter, and the thing that is great about this movie is that it does, because of the fact that Jeffrey's wife leaves him at a certain point in the film, the the stakes for him, I mean, yes, his family's safety is still important to him, but they're away. They've removed themselves from the equation
Right.
to a certain extent. So the stakes basically shift for him because
Hmm.
originally the main stakes involve uh, him making sure he can maintain his health insurance that his non-disclosure
For
agreement
his,
allows
yeah,
for
for
his
his daughter. Yeah.
daughter, and then so but once his wife leaves, it's basically a matter of, okay, are we actually going to do this? And then the next big point in the story is, well, is CBS going to air it?
Right.
And the way that it's really kind of a puzzle. It's like if one challenge is arises, then other, then other, then another. They're all, but they don't feel like very traditional story beats, and that's the thing that's really great about the way Michael Mann, Eric Roth, the screenwriters, tell this story.
Hmm. No, absolutely. No, I mean, told in the style. I mean, if you were going to put this movie up there with like an All the President's Men, as far as like building the suspense and just taking you on the ride of like when you think this is going to happen, that happens.
Yeah.
They just movies like this only come along every once in a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this really, and that comparison with All the President's Men is really appropriate because it's sort of the next, it's a next generation version of All the President's Men in the sense that here, okay, All the President's Men has the challenges of journalism in the 70s and political, how to talk about political corruption. This one is about corporate corruption and
Hmm.
what that means and what challenges that the journalism what challenges journalism faces with regards to that, especially television journalism.
Well, and think about where we are right now with political and corporate corruption.
Oh, it's
You get every news every day. So I wonder, you almost wish someone like Mike Wallace were still around
yeah.
because he would have a he would have a field day with this.
Oh yeah. I mean that, and it's funny because of the fact that like I gotten this to watch shortly after watching the documentary on Mike Wallace, and so it's like having this in my having that documentary and who he was and sort of his recounting of things like the Wygan situation in that was really kind of helpful and made you appreciate the type of journalist that Mike Wallace was. But one of the things that I think is interesting about that documentary is that there are also times where Mike Wallace, like there's an interview in the documentary with Mike Wallace where he's interviewing Bill O'Reilly, and O'Reilly basically says, "Well, it's like I'm basically following in your footsteps in terms of how I mean that's not entirely true, but also is kind of true in the way of
Still a
how
little bit.
yeah, and how Mike Wallace did things, and that's one of the things we see early on in the Insider because the film doesn't start with it's not exclusively about Jeffrey Wygand's story. It starts out with
Well, Bergman and
yeah, Bergman going to try to set up an interview with the Grand Ayatollah, and basically seeing bits of that interview with Wallace, played by the great Christopher Plummer, you get the sense of this is who Lowell Bergman is, and this is Mike Wallace is. So
yeah.
these are going to be 2/3 of the story that you're telling, and this is why this story is going to see having these two people at the center of this story is part of what is going to grab you about this story.
Well, and also, you get a sense right. in that opening scene that of what made those two guys work together so well and what made has made 60 Minutes
Yeah.
so successful. I think now 60 Minutes has kind of lost the. I mean, it's still entertaining. It still has, but it kind of lost that the edge that
Yeah.
it had when Ed Bradley and Mike Wallace, were kind of the guys leading the charge in many ways.
Well, and especially since now so much other news programs basically are going after the same type of journalism that 60 Minutes pioneered. It kind of it makes sense in that way, but also it makes sense in the fact that once those guys were retired or passed away, it's like it was almost inevitable that 60 Minutes was not going to be the powerhouse that was at its heyday.
Well, it's different now because, and I don't know if a lot can be said. We could just have a discussion about journalism alone in regards to this film, but of how journalism has changed, of
Yeah.
what producers will put on the air. Like,
Yep.
if without thinking about lawsuits or things like that, putting it on the air because if it's controversial, it equals people are going to be watching it.
Yeah.
It's why everyone always wonders, whenever Bill Maher has a show on, why he would have Ann Coulter on the show. Ann Coulter is universally disliked by many, but Bill Maher is a smart guy. He knows it's going to equal ratings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like I think that's the way a lot of TV shows, news shows are these days. They're going to have someone on that it's like, okay, this is a controversial figure. They're going to get into arguments, but people are going to be glued.
Right.
I think 60 Minutes back at that time, like, Don Hewitt and Lowell Bergman, less about controversy and in doing the right thing and telling this story that needed to be told. I mean, it's a safety,
It's a
it's not just
public
for.
safety issue.
Oh,
It's a
sure.
public health issue. But I mean, the thing is, it's like I don't know about skirting controversy. I mean, I think if controversy came with the story, I don't think they were necessarily. I think they were up to the challenge of that. And this particular story with Jeffrey Wigand, because of all of the different uh, mechanisms in place, because A, you're going after big tobacco, B, you have Jeffrey Wigand's non-disclosure agreement. How much can he really legally say without getting sued? What happens if we post this? Like you said, it's like there's a real legitimate threat of getting sued here. That's why they push. That's why they pulled the original piece,
Yeah.
because and it's like, no, we can't have this heat on. And it was probably the and it was certainly probably the biggest mistake that 60 Minutes ever made,
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that it you once a news organization like this caves on a story like this for whatever reason, you basically opened yourself up to people questioning your veracity as journalists.
Yeah.
Period.
And I think that's the point that Lowell Bergman was trying to make.
Yeah.
It's like, if we're not going to go ahead with this story, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to, nitpick? Well, we're going to go after this guy but it's kind of like, this is what Edward R. Murrow and all of the great news people, this is why they became newscasters. They
Yeah.
get out there and they find the stories that it might to expose
Mm-hmm.
because because it's in this case especially it's public health. Edward R. Murrow, it was McCarthyism, and Mike Wallace. I mean, he even says in the movie, he's made like little strides, like with Sadat and the Ayatollah and people like that. It's a responsibility. It's what they're paid to do.
Yeah. And also, I mean, the thing is, it's like once the narrative for this movie is just so it's so fascinating to watch this narrative move because of the fact that it is a very, on the one hand, it is very structurally very much A to B to C, but
Mm-hmm.
the way it goes about it, there's so many other different subplots and areas that it goes in because you have Bergman basically getting involved with the district attorney of Louisiana at one point in a lawsuit that they have against Big Tobacco. And the reason for that is they think that if Wigand testifies in that um, lawsuit under oath, that basically negates his non disclosure agreement. So then we can air our piece on
Mm-hmm.
Wigand.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different part of the equation that just adds a little bit more complexity to what's already a very complex story.
Oh yeah. Now, and just watching it all unravel, um, like just in that way is it's extraordinary. It's what makes a good movie. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like this is it's a genuine suspense film. But I mean,
Yeah.
I don't recall. I don't think there's any violence or anything like that. But this is, I mean, this is the kind of movie that Alan Pakula, who did Clute and All the President's Men and The Parallax View and things like that. What and throughout the '70s, those it made what made those kinds of movies so great and movies that still hold up
Yeah.
now, given in the wake of our political and climate now. Um, I would wonder. I wonder if if Mike Wallace and Ed Bradley and all of them, how they what they would make of everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing that was most striking to me about the Mike Wallace
Documentary.
documentary was I couldn't help but think of, well, what would how would Mike Wallace feel about what he's seeing right now, and
Because news,
how would he work to combat it?
well, news reporting is so different now.
Yeah,
Everything is, it's not even news, it's tweets.
yeah,
Um, and someone, Tammy or Tony Lauren or wherever her name is, like she just comes out with something once a week that's nasty
yeah.
and, or says something against this. And she calls herself a journalist. She's
Mm-hmm.
not a journalist. She's a tweeter. She's an angry tweeter.
Yeah,
That's tweeting is not journalism. I think journalism. It's in this day and age, it's so hard to determine what journalism really is because of the way we get our news. I
mm-hmm.
mean, I mean, 60 Minutes all through the '70s, '80s, and the '90s, it was always number one in the Nielsen ratings
Yeah,
because every Sunday night you had to sit and watch it with your family. And I would watch it with my family. I didn't always understand what was going
oh
on or what
yeah,
they were
same.
talking about, but it was
Yeah,
always, you knew for that hour that it was going to be arresting and
yeah,
that like it would always have something that was going to be keep you on the edge of your seat, something they would always interview a celebrity or a musician that was always funny, but also very revealing.
mm-hmm.
Like I would say 60 Minutes, like, as far as like celebrity interviews, were always more revealing than someone like Barbara Walters.
Oh yeah,
Like Mike Wallace or Ed Bradley, they wouldn't let you off the hook. And I
mm-hmm.
think and I think in this case, going back and watching the Wigand interview, Mike Wallace, and as they depicted in the movie, Mike Wallace said, "Do you regret coming forward?"
Yeah,
And you could kind of see like the subtextually, it's like, do you know that? Do you like if you had it to do over? And Jeffrey Wigand, of course, said, it was the right thing to do,
yeah.
and it was. I mean, even if it put his life in danger, there is something about like not being able to sleep at night if you don't
Mm-hmm.
go for what is right, even if it does cost you your job, your family, your life. I mean, if in this case, hopefully his family understand. I don't know. Actually, I think he and his wife got divorced. I'm not
Yeah,
100%
they did.
sure. They
Yeah,
did get
and
divorced. Yeah.
that's something that starts throughout the film.
Yeah.
That's something that starts in the course of the film. Um, I mean, first they move away and then they get divorced.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and the thing is, it's like this isn't. it's you're absolutely right about this being a very suspenseful film. I mean, this is essentially a thriller. This is a real life thriller, and even though it's one of those things where it's like it's based on a true story, but the fact that we know how the true story ends doesn't make it any less dramatic
Not the
because
fact that it happened.
and
Yeah.
that's why Michael Mann is so important because of the fact that he is very much approaching this film in the same way he approached Manhunter or Heat or Miami Vice or Collateral, where it's like it's a character study, and also it's there's a larger narrative being told than
Yeah.
just it's very standard thriller. No, it's not. It's there's a lot more going on here than seems to be its start, and that's one of the things that's so great about it.
Well, and like Lowell Bergman says, and he says, since when has the paragon of journalistic integrity have had, an outside corporation or have had lawyers tell us what we're going to air and not air? I mean,
Yeah.
because when that happens, I'm sure there are countless stories about 45 that news outlets want to air, whether it's true or
Mm-hmm.
not. But that's the thing is trying to sift through what is real and what is,
Yeah.
I hesitate to use the phrase fake news, but but that's where we are. And I think this movie is a reminder of how people go out and get the news by going out there, putting their lives on the line, not just Jeffrey Wigand, but Mike Wallace and Lowell Bergman, because
Mm-hmm.
it's life and death for these guys. Because Jeffrey Wigand can't sleep at night if he doesn't go forward with the story, and Lowell Bergman can't sleep at night knowing that I could have done something to get this out there. I didn't do my job, and
Yeah.
as how this is the impression I get from how Mike Wallace is portrayed is that he is concerned with his legacy.
Yes.
And I think that was the point of contention that Mike Wallace himself was unhappy with.
Yeah.
Which I think, watching the documentary and knowing of what I have seen of Mike Wallace, I think there's a little bit of truth to that. I think for dramatic
Mm-hmm.
effect, they did paint Plummer's Mike Wallace as a guy who was a little concerned with his integrity.
Right.
But you watch the movie, but then you get to that scene where he chews out Gina Gershon and Stephen Tobolowsky.
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily makes up for anything, but at least you get the idea that you know, legacy damn legacy be damned. That he does
Right.
care about telling the story. But I think people at the time, just wanted, oh, Mike Wallace is just not happy. No one's ever happy with. A living person is portrayed how they really are. I'm sure the family of Roger Ailes isn't happy with how Russell Crowe
Mm-hmm.
has portrayed him. And I know John Lithgow has another Roger Ailes. He's playing Roger Ailes, I think, in an HBO movie. But
Mm.
no, but it is interesting, like just watching the insider of just how news is reported, how it's researched, and how I'm not a journalist, but how everything has changed. Like
Yeah.
how I wonder how Mike Wallace would work in a Twitter world, like seeing Dan Rather on Twitter. Of course he's retired, but Dan Rather, he goes after 45 like everybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
There's a kind of like, well, like this is the way things are now. So, I was saying to my in-laws recently, I said, I never thought I'd live in a time where people could actually go on a social media outlet and tweet the president of the United States negative, like not only just like directly, but like, negative stuff directly, whether you like the
Right.
president or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it's where we are. It's a cycle of nastiness that
Right.
hopefully we get away from. But
Mm-hmm. Well, and the fact
like,
of the matter is, it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right in that. I think Wallace's criticisms on the portrayal of him in this movie are fair because, like you said, this is fundamentally done about for dramatic effect. It's
Well, and
it's
also
it's
the story was adapted. Roth, I think it was a Vanity Fair article that,
yeah,
and then before the the news broadcast, and so Eric Roth and I think Michael Mann saw that, and they drew the screenplay from that, and then of course
right.
I think they got cooperation from CBS, or about as much cooperation as they
As
probably
they
wanted to
would,
give.
yeah.
Yeah,
And well, and the thing is, it's like it occurred to me when you were talking that it's like basically what freed up, because they did eventually, many months later, they did eventually air the original version of the segment,
yeah,
and it was because of the fact that basically the the smear campaign against Wygand was basically disproven as complete falsity,
hmm,
and so that basically, because that was as much about why CBS backed off from it as anything, because of the fact that the smear campaign against Wygant had started, and they and it tarnished his reputation to the
hmm,
point where it's like they weren't quite sure, they weren't comfortable with him as the main voice on this issue
sure.
in that way. But obviously, the lawsuit was another big part of it, and the money involved and stuff like that, because there was a merger that was possibly going to happen at some point. So there were a
Yeah,
lot of different things, but yeah, I mean, they did eventually air. I mean, you shared with me the link to the original
hmm.
segment, which is
It's
finding all the.
extraordinary.
It is,
It's
and
extraordinary. Yeah.
it's also extraordinary to see how well Russell Crowe and Christopher Plummer get get how accurate they get Wygant and Wallace in that segment.
Without doing an impersonation.
Yeah.
Like they don't do an impersonation of either of them. They bring their own interpretation, as they are brilliant actors. But also, you do get the sense that, well, and that's Michael Mann. I mean, that's an
Hmm.
example. Like it's well researched, well detailed, everything down to with what was on the in the background on bookcases. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's what makes his movies extraordinary.
Hmm.
Switching gears, the one thing that I've always liked about Michael Mann's movies that are his use of color.
Yes.
If like the use of color from Heat and from this film and Collateral and
Hmm.
Ali especially, and the what he uses it for is like shaping the tone of the film and of specific scenes.
Yeah.
And I've just always been blown away. He uses, like in Heat with Robert De Niro. I think he used a lot of blues.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like and all like in De Niro's lone apartment, empty apartment, and you just wonder how the detailing of that. It just goes back to how detailed and how he works with his editor and his cinematographer to
Yeah.
capture that, because it really does create
Oh no, I
incredible
mean,
mood.
you can tell, you can tell that the use of color and color grading and color grading is extremely important to Michael Mann. I mean, like you said, blues and even blacks, because there's a lot of black in Heat, and part of it
Oh
is because
yeah.
of how many night shoots he does.
Mm,
But yeah, and then you've got Collateral, which was the first one which he shot digitally. You have Miami Vice, which he was another step in that evolution for him as a visual filmmaker. And I mean,
yeah.
the movie Miami Vice is it's okay, but still a Michael Mann film, and it's still got some interest in there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Um,
the whole time. I mean, I remember I missed Don Johnson, but nothing against Colin Farrell or Jamie Foxx.
yeah,
But well, Miami Vice, when that came on, like that's an example of also Michael Mann was an innovator. I mean, when
yeah,
that show came on and when Crime Story came on, uh, the shows had not been told like this.
hmm,
In this kind of dramatic way. Kind of I mean, around the same time that shows like Hill Street Blues were coming on, where things were getting grittier,
yeah,
dirtier, and getting away from the kind of, okay, the cop series. All right, in 45 minutes, the cop's going to find all of the evidence and find the killer at the end. Well,
right,
Michael Mann shows and Hill Street Blues and all of that, they delved more into the character. I mean, when we could talk about Heat as well, but And the same thing with Heat and The Insider is that you really get a sense of who these people are, not only
Yeah.
as not only Jeffrey Wigand as a scientist, as a father, as a husband, but as a person. Lowell Bergman, same thing. You get, and that both of them are actually very, very similar. They're both
Yeah.
obsessive in their ways. They're both determined, stubborn. They bring out the best and probably the worst in each other because they know. But without both of them working together and their combative nature, this
Yeah.
story wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and the thing about Bergman that's so interesting is the fact that he started out as a he started out as an independent journalist. He wasn't always a big producer for 60 Minutes. He was
Mm-hmm.
kind of a rebellious journalist, and for a long time, and you get that impression watching him. But then there are other moments where it's like you see him talking with friends and stuff like that, and they sort of and sort of you see this rebellious nature about him, and it's like he would be somebody who you know he's somebody like who would work for Vice, or he would be an independent
Well,
documentarian or
and
something like
he's who
that.
you want out there because
Yeah.
the thing that in that scene that I referenced before, where he's kind of telling off Don Hewitt and
Hmm.
Eric Cluster, and Wallace is sitting there. It's like, you pay me to do this.
Yeah.
Like, you any other story, you're like, attack, get him. This, but the fact that it's a huge tobacco company looking, to the threat of lawsuit, which is what 45 does every day, which scares people off.
Yeah.
But it's like, Bergman's willing to call the bluff and
Hmm.
say, it's newsworthy, we air it, and but the threat of lawsuit, and even a big, I mean, I don't know if, I mean, Brown and Williamson, they may have gone ahead with the lawsuit, but I think every newspaper probably, I don't know if they would have sided with 60 Minutes or CBS as a network, or I
Yeah.
mean, it would have made them, I would think it would have made Brown and Williamson look guilty.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely the case. We've touched on we touched on the visual style of the movie, the visual the way Michael Mann shoots the movie. I did want to bring up the way he uses music in the movies, because
Oh yeah.
that's always one of the most interesting things, going to the music for Last of the Mohicans and Heat.
Oh
And then
yeah.
here in The Insider, you have Lisa Gerard, who uh, would be even more well known later in the next year, working with Hans Zimmer in Gladiator.
Mm-hmm.
She was the vocalist on Gladiator and a bunch of other film scores. She's done a bunch of other stuff since then. And if I can, Peter Bork is the co-composer on this,
Mm-hmm.
and their work is just so lovely in this, and it's just it's such a great evocative score that really gets to the emotional and suspenseful components of the movie.
Well, you said it right there, evocative. It's really, I mean, like all of Michael Mann's films, he has music that it just kind of underplays throughout. Like, it's not big and flashy and over the top, but it does add along with the coloring, and
Mm-hmm.
the look of everything just adds to the mood. No, it's what I mean. It's what a good film score should do. I mean,
Yeah.
it just, it elevates the tension. It and it helps move the story along. And if it's, I'm a big film score person. If it's like, I'll listen to the Heat score all of the time
Oh yeah.
because it's just, it's so unique.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, it's just a single. I think it's just like a piano chord, like, or two piano chords, just ding ding ding, that, and it's just
Well,
it's it,
there's a lot of different musical use in that movie, because you've got score cues by Ellie Gunthal, who's a wonderful composer. You
mm-hmm.
you also have um music from the Passengers, which was a project with U2 and Brian Eno. You have Brian Eno tracks, you have Moby tracks, you have a lot of different music that he uses. He's somebody who sort of like Ridley Scott, like his soundtracks very much. If there's not a single composer on it, it's something that he sort of like mixes and matches musical ideas for his
Yeah.
liking. He's sort of like Kubrick in that respect too.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean he's one that I've always been a fan of as far as film music. I've always loved that score.
It's and with here, I mean, there's so many other things that we could discuss about. I mean, you could run down the list. I mean, we could go all day just on the actors, the quality of the writing.
Yeah.
Eric Roth and Michael Mann, just a solid script that is it's fast paced. It's
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, in the opening, I mean, like the sequence, there's it does find opportunities where little bits of humor can come in, but
Yeah.
the banter between Pacino and Christopher Plummer, of course,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they bring out the best in each other as well. No, I mean you could look on the IMDb page and just go down the list of like the actors that are in the movie. That it's just and actors that might be in the film for one scene or two scene or what have you, but they all score their points. And like I said, that's really what I always take away. That's what I always look forward to when I watch a Michael Mann film. It's like, oh, who did he gather for this? Because it's I mean smart actor if they get into one of his movies.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you look at I mean, he's got Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. He's got Val Kilmer. He's got Ashley Judd. He's got Hank Azaria in a role. He's got
John Voight,
John
William
Voight.
Finch, Tom Sizemore, Tom Noonan is in there. I mean, Danny Trejo.
Yeah. Oh God, I forgot Trejo was in there. Yeah,
Henry Rollins is even in it. I mean, Henry Rollins gets thrown through a window. Dennis Haysbert, Michael T. Williamson, Wes Studi, who Ted Levine is in there. I mean, it's just goes on and on and on and on and on of just like really really solid cast, and of course Diane Venora and Xander Berkeley. Oh yeah, Natalie Portman, one of her early film roles. God, that's coming up on 25 years of that movie came out.
I know,
and it's the same thing here. I mean, you get a call from Michael Mann to be in one of his movies. You don't care the part. And it's kind of like I would put Michael Mann up there, like as far as like the great ensemble like that Robert Altman would always gather, for many of his films. Like these are movies that like it doesn't matter the size of the part. It's going to be good script. Everyone's going to have a chance to score their points and have something nice to show for it.
Yeah, and I had forgotten Eric Roth had co-written the script because of the fact that I remember his name more from Forrest Gump, but I mean he did this. He later co-wrote Munich.
Good Shepherd.
Oh yeah, I forgot the Good Shepherd, but he also co-wrote Munich for Spielberg.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he's done some really interesting true story storytelling when it comes to movies. So I mean, it's not just the Oscar winner's winning screenwriter Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's one of the more interesting things about this. Yeah, we were talking earlier about we were talking about earlier that Christopher Plummer did not get nominated for this, which I had forgotten about. I'd forgotten he didn't get nominated for this. He should have gotten nominated for this.
I think at least he had been nominated. I think he won a couple of the Boston Film Critics Awards.
And that's why I was remembering.
But this was the thing. This movie, I think, was the jolt that Christopher Plummer's film career needed. I mean, Christopher Plummer, he's one of the most distinguished stage, film, television actors ever. But the quality of some of his movies, and not, I mean, hey, people got to pay the bills. was not always he wasn't always in great movies.
Right.
And this movie was like, I think after he did this, he just it took off again.
Yeah.
And he's working. I think he's working more now in films than he ever did. I mean, I'm sure prior to this, I mean, throughout the rest of most of his career, he's been best known as Captain Von Trapp, which I know
Yeah.
that I think he's made his peace with now. Um, but like this, and he always had the talent, and he was always memorable in any movie he did. It's just sometimes, like a lot of actors, sometimes the movies hits or misses. But
Hmm.
I remember this one. I remember like there are several scenes that he's in, and I thought, well, at least he's going to get acknowledged with a nomination,
Hmm.
and and he got it. I think ended up getting his first one a couple of years later for The Last Station, and then he
Yeah.
won for richly deserved for Beginners.
Yeah, he
But
was wonderful in Beginners.
oh yeah,
So, but yeah, and I wonder, I wonder if part of the reason he didn't get nominated was how Mike Wallace felt about the movie,
that's
ironically in the
possible.
portrayal. Because yeah, I mean, this feels like it would have been a no brainer nomination. Because I mean, even in a year where like you look at the supporting actor category, it's pretty considerably stacked.
Oh yeah,
Like we talked about best actor earlier this year with American Beauty. I mean, best supporting actor, you had Haley Joel Osment, you had Michael Clark Duncan, you had Tom
Tom
Cruise,
Cruise
Jude Law. I believe that was his first nomination for Talented Mr. Ripley.
and Michael Caine
Yeah,
who
who
won.
ended up winning. And it's like I he should have been nominated, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure who I will have gotten rid of in that category.
Yeah.
Maybe Michael Caine. I've never been a huge Cider House Rules fan,
Hmm.
but I mean, I can't really argue with Michael Caine winning an Oscar. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those years where like this year was just very very rich when it came to movies and when it came to performances. And one of the most surprising things that I'm finding rewatching a lot of these movies, The Insider was certainly one where it's like you could make this movie now and I think it would connect even more
Oh yeah.
because because of the fact that because of the way the world's changed. And it's like I rewatched Election, I think it was last week or the week before,
Oh, that's another
and
good
it's
one.
funny because of the fact that it's like that that movie is brilliant when it comes to politics and the political satire nature of it, but it's also a movie where it's like I wonder if I also couldn't help but think that if it came out now, I feel after the 2016 election, if critics might uh, criticize it for being a little too on the nose and like, you're hitting it a little bit too hard. It's like, no, they're not.
Well,
But
it says
yeah,
something about Alexander Payne with that movie is that he knew something was coming,
yeah,
like that kind of environment, that kind of culture of like, you know, a lot of was it Tracy Fleck? Was that her
Tracy
name?
Flick, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Tracy Flick. And but yeah, the thing is, it's like it's one of those things where I mean and it's been ages since I've seen Citizen Ruth, his first film, but
Hmm.
I remember both of those just being really sharp on the nose political satires. I mean,
Oh
he
yeah.
kind of got away from that. Like, I mean, downsizing was kind of in that vein, but it wasn't as strong in terms of
No, I
what he
didn't
was
think
trying to do.
downsizing. I knew what downsizing was trying to do, but I don't think the film quite knew what it wanted to be.
Yeah.
Um, and but like he got away from like I mean Nebraska. I think is just a wonderful,
Yes.
like just a great story, and anything that would for Bruce Dern
Yeah.
about Schmidt. Sideways. I mean you look at a lot of the films that he's done is that they're all really just about regular people who are
Hmm.
flawed, very
Yeah.
flawed people and human.
Yeah, and I mean
And
it's not to knock that side from like About Schmidt to Nebraska, because all of those films are really wonderful.
oh yeah,
But at the same time, it's like it'd be nice to see him get back to some of the vicious political satire that he did in Citizen Ruth and Election. But
absolutely. And I wonder, Michael Mann, what was the last film he did?
wasn't it that
Is it?
movie Black Hat? That the movie,
Yeah,
yeah,
was it? Oh God, Chris Hemsworth.
yes,
That's right. I don't think that. I think that was one of those movies that kind of came and went. I think.
yeah, yeah, it really kind of was. Let's see, because yeah, I don't think he's done anything since. But yeah, and the thing is, it's like it's a shame because of the fact that he is such a good director. I mean, even like we haven't even talked about Thief, which I personally have not seen,
Oh,
and I know I need to, and I'll
Thief.
probably make that.
All you got to do when you watch Thief, all you got to do is watch Robert Prosky, the
Yeah,
late great Robert Prosky. Um, and at that time, I mean, that was like a movie that if that came out today, I think that would, it would click with audiences for whatever reason. In
yeah,
1981, when it came out, it kind of it's of course become a cult film, but I don't think it did very well when it first came out. But like,
right.
and it was around the time I don't think James Caan's film career was going that well. I know he was having, I think he had some substance abuse problems around that
Mm-hmm.
time, but it's a brilliant performance, and I think it's probably one of his best. And but
Yeah.
like just the way that story is told, but like really gritty and dirty and just. Now, Robert Prosky, another example of like, a guy who'd been around for a while and plays this really menacing guy. And I think if it had had any type of marketing behind it, he would have been acknowledged with some an award, which would have been richly deserving of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I was I it took rewatching. I mean, that's part of why I like the. I've been rewatching these movies as I've been going through the class of 1999, because of the fact that rewatching these movies, not only does it get fresh in my head to talk about, but it also gives me a chance to revisit them and see and sort of see how I feel about the movie now. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, The Insider is a movie that rewatching it remind me exactly why it was just immediately a great film for me and to watch the first time around. And yeah, I mean, I do remember thinking it was a really fantastic movie, and I was glad that I got a chance to see it in theaters.
That's something. Seeing, well, and revisiting the movie again for me, it was kind of like, now, being older and being, watching the news, and you're wondering, God, like, how many stories are out there that the network didn't go forward with
Right.
because of a lawsuit or because of this? And it's not like, you know, the old like Ben Bradley, he would with All the President's Men, he would be like, we can't publish this because we don't have enough yet. We
Yeah.
don't have a smoking gun. We don't have the big thing.
Mm.
It's not going high enough. That they had plenty of stuff. It's just, I mean, it's kind of like, he's got, uh, we got a story. We're not going to air it because, it's we're going to
Well,
get sued.
well, and it's funny. There are a couple of things that we haven't even talked about yet. And one of them is the fact that it's like when Bergman meets Wygand, it has nothing to do with what that story of what that particular story is going to be. That story
Yeah,
comes from he's just meeting Wygand to get some scientific get
evidence
a
here.
scientific
Yeah.
reading on some evidence that's come into his possession from another uh, tobacco company. So
Right.
that's how they even get involved. But also, this film isn't, we've focused a lot on the journalism aspect of it, and it is the primary aspect of the movie, but the film is also about whistleblowing.
Oh yeah.
And the psychological toll that can take on somebody who makes that choice to to whistleblow and to tell the truth about something that it could very well, and in case of Wygand, it did quite honestly change his life
Mm-hmm.
and what that decision means. And that's one of the that's one of the things that makes the Insider so interesting as well, because it's as much as it is about journalism, it's also about the subject, and it's about the subject of the journalism, and that's the thing that's so compelling about it, because of the fact that if you don't have that connection with Wygand, then the movie loses something considerably.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, I mean, watching it again, watching it as a father, that if if you're put into that situation where you're in the midst of something that you know is bad, but you're held back, you can't say it, or if you do say something, you're going to get sued and your life is going to be put in danger. But it's kind of like it's like what I was saying before. It's like it's what makes you sleep at night and what can't. Like people like Michael Gambon's character, he knows exactly what he's doing,
Yeah.
and he sleeps fine.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people out there in our in the political landscape and corporations every day that do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of, and that's what I always wonder as like as an actor looking at it. It's like you watch some of these people in the news and you just wonder, like, how do you sleep at night? Like,
Yeah.
I'd always wonder, like, Sarah Sanders, she would come out every day and say these things, and it's just like, you can't believe that. But it's like, well, and there's always the line that everybody says, like, well, God, well, what does 45 have on him, or what does 45 have on her?
Yeah.
It's like, it's a kind of a valid point, because if someone does whistle blow, 45 has he has lawyers, or he'll go on and say something in a barrage of nasty treat, and then he'll get his followers to do the same thing, or
Yeah.
threats or anything like that. So that's the culture
Mm-hmm.
that we're in, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, did you have anything more to say about the movie you wanted to bring up?
Just no, I mean everything we've touched upon. I mean, it's if anyone hasn't seen the film, highly recommended. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's about 2.5 hours long, but it doesn't feel long. Like Michael Mann's movies, like he is almost 3 hours, I
Yeah.
think. But you don't feel that length at all. I remember seeing that in the theater, and it's like, oh my god, that's it. Like it's a movie that you want more of, and
Yeah.
and the Insider's the same thing. You want more about Bergman, about all of these characters and the story, and you want to know what happens to them. But it's a hell of a ride, and I highly recommend everybody
Yeah.
see it.
Well, Tim, thank you very much for joining me once again on the podcast. It's always great to talk to you, and
Always a pleasure.
I definitely appreciate you joining me on the class of 1999 series I'm doing, where I'm looking back on movies from that year.
Go 99. That's when I graduated from college, so it feels like a lifetime ago. But
I
no, it
know, right?
it was yeah, I know. It's well, you blink and it's like they have like there are movies that I think what there was a some movie that's celebrating the 20th anniversary. Oh no, Office Space we were talking about. Oh,
Yeah.
I can't believe that came out 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just wild that or like that Shawshank came out 25 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
these movies it feels like yesterday. But no, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, Brian. Talk movies. We could go all day on movies.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to thank Timothy Cox for joining me today to talk about The Insider. Catch our discussion earlier in the year where we talked about American Beauty, and that was a really great discussion. Had a lot of different issues brought up during it, and but The Insider has a lot going for it. And if you didn't see it in theaters, or if you haven't seen it, and especially if you haven't seen it and you're a Michael Mann fan, I highly recommend it, because it is one of his best movies, if not maybe his best movie. Coming up on the class of 1999, we've got some more comedy, got some animated discussions, And we're also going to be going into Biv Horror as October comes around. For now, though, this is Brian Scuttle with Sonic Cinema at www.sonic-cinema.com. Hit us up on patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. You'll see a lot of early access reviews for movies like The Insider, which I'm reviewing for the first time prior to the release of those reviews with in conjunction to the podcast. Um, for now, thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have a good day.